Hi, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I cover a high-level overview of what to expect in the salary negotiation phase for a data scientist or analytics role. Salary negotiation can be one of the most uncomfortable parts of the job interview process for a data scientist or an analyst, but it can also be rewarding if you feel like you did your most to push for what you deserve. Let's get into it.
I'm Dr. Christy. I'm a researcher and a data science director, and I help analysts and data scientists take their career to the next level.
So first, these days it's very common for job descriptions to have the range of the salary, which is great. That used to not be the case. It used to be much more infrequent. Now that's awesome that it's there. The problem is put a huge range and it actually doesn't help you. So it just depends how valuable that's going to be for you as you're getting ready to head into that negotiation conversation. So what do you do if they don't have it, or even if they do have it actually, is Google and different websites that give you at least some insights into what to expect. And you want to do a couple of things. You want to have a general sense about yourself. So somebody with your skill set and your experience and your background in this current market that you're in the field industry that you're in general, what compensation should you be expecting? So at this stage, you're just collecting information. So don't get stuck on anything. Just try to build up this body of information that you're then going to use to figure out what your range is, what your numbers are. And the other piece of that is you want to look at the particular role that you're applying for and get a sense of what in general for that role in your industry. You could do region if you want, but generally what do they seem to be making? And then the third piece is you want to look at the organization. Suppose you're going for a manager role at a particular organization, you can search that and see, like, in general, managers at this organization make this range, this average, or you can look at competitors sometimes, or like in the same industry, and see what that looks like. So at this point, you have a lot of numbers, and you can build your way towards figuring out a couple of key numbers that you want to keep in mind. And a lot of people talk about this. There's these three numbers. It's what is your acceptable number, what is your desired number, and what is your walkaway number. So acceptable number is basically like the minimum that you would accept. Your desired is obviously what you hope for, and then your walkaway is you would walk away if it's that or below. Again, this is high level. There are tons of resources that can go much deeper. I just want to give you an overview so that you kind of have a roadmap of the key steps and the key research that you should do. So with all that research you did based on what somebody like you can expect, what that type of organization and role can expect, and then if you did get some kind of range in the job description, when you put all that together, you should be able to kind of put together a general range, and as well as a like average or typical kind of number that you think this is generally the range that somebody like you could get, and a typical average number that you would get. And same thing for the organization or people at that level of role you're looking for. What is the range and what is the average number? And then you use that to figure out those three numbers we talked about: the acceptable number, the desired number, and the walkaway number. So those are key. Never head into any sort of, even an HR screener, because a lot of times in that initial, way before the negotiation happens, even in that HR screener, they'll try to pin you down on a range or a number. And even before you have that, you should kind of, in your mind at least, whether you share it or not, you should have that in your head. And if they say something that's like way too low, you should already know, like, absolutely not. So it's important to have those numbers ready and keep them refreshed and up to date. So in addition, part of your calculation has to do with the specifics of that job, but also your current situation at your current job. So do you really want to move regardless? So you would be open to considering a lateral move, or you might be open to considering a pay cut because either you like that job so much, or you really are in a bad situation with your current role. You have to know those sorts of things. And also things like the title. Is it a better position? Is it a better title? Is it a better scope of responsibilities? Something that's interesting to you content-wise? Is the location desirable? The organization itself in terms of like how big, how small, how well known? All those sorts of things factor into how desirable that job is for you. And that is part of the salary conversation. And you should know how you value those things relative to the salary. I've had situations where it varies a little bit based on organizations. There's some organizations where that organization, that role, everything about it is amazing. And so you have a certain, you hope hope for a great salary, but it's just there's different aspects of that role where salary is not the key thing for you. You need some minimum numbers, but you're not insisting on like the high end. But then there's other roles where there's things you don't particularly like about it, or there's trade-offs you're making. So it's really important that if you were to take that position, they pay you really, really well on the high end of the range, because they're maybe it's not as well-known company, or things about it that you feel like you're taking a cut there. So you do require a higher salary to consider that role. So at this point, you should be getting pretty clear on what your preferences are, how you feel about things before you head into the conversation. And there's a few more things to factor in. So one is their likelihood to give a raise. If you can get that off the message board, that's going to help you a lot in terms of being in a situation where for some reason they're not offering the high end, and you're trying to understand how quickly you would move into a favorable salary, as opposed to you take a job that's on the lower end and then they also don't really give raises, which happens. Then now you're kind of in a low salary band for like all the years that you happen to work there. And of course, you take into account the other things besides base salary, which is like bonus and stocks and whatever other things they throw in there. Hi, if you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. It's really helpful as I'm a brand new channel getting started, and it makes a huge impact. Let's get back to the video. At this point, when you head into that conversation, they may share the range, they may ask you for your range. I'm not that particular on who says what. Obviously, their common recommendation is to get them to say the number. Either way, you have your range. And if they are not within that, you're not going to agree. So I typically don't get worried about like, oh, I'm going to say something on the low end. Sometimes you can say something like, if you guys have a range in mind, I'll share my opinion or feedback on that. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And especially in a screener, they might be really pinning you down, even when you say all those excuses, like I need to learn more about the role, I need to meet the team, I need to understand responsibilities. They'll still like really, really push. And sometimes you're successful at not giving a number, and then other times you're not. So it's kind of a mix of things. But in general, if you head in and you're very clear on those numbers, then if they say a number that's too low, you know that you don't have to waste time talking to them, because that you don't want to like go through a bunch of interviews just to find out that the salary is way too low and something you wouldn't tolerate. Or they may ask you to share a range. You may say you need to do some research and circle back and ask them for a range. Like y'all can go back and forth a little bit. I think that's fine, but at the end of the day, you have your range. You are clear on why you have those preferences, and you can share a range. The thing I'll caution you is the low end of your range tends to be what they'll focus on. So I've heard people say just give one particular number, and it's better if it's a specific number. I think it just depends on the situation, on when you want to use those things, but I do agree with the range. So don't give a low end, high end range, and the high end is what you want. You just need to give a range that you'd be okay with the low end, or say the number, and then they can tell you if they are close to that or not. And so if they share a range, you can sometimes give feedback and say that's too low, or you can say we're close to each other, we'll be able to figure something out. A lot of times that's sufficient, and they don't nail you down to a specific number at that point. Generally, that nailing you down to a specific number happens when they won't give you a range and they'll keep pushing for you to give a range and for you to give a number. Those pushy situations are where they're going to like try to pin you down to a specific number. And I just think this is all part of your candidate experience. So, if they want to mess around like that, then let them. And it may not work out, but you can share your range, you can share your number, see how they respond. A lot of times they're within the ballpark and it's fine, or they may say we're way lower, in which case you don't have to waste time talking to them, or they might say we're close but we can't get that close. If you've done your research well, you don't have to worry about this phantom problem. They would have paid you hundreds of thousands of dollars more if only you had said this magic number, and because you put a low number for yourself, they came in low. Like, you should know what you're capable of earning in general and in certain fields. Like, you should know that based on what I just shared with you about your research process to come up with those numbers. So at that point, no one can really like take advantage of you in the sense of like pay you really different from what you should be paid, because it's on you to do that research and get a sense of what you're capable of earning. And that way, in the interview process, you're going to meet a wide range of people. So you're going to meet people that price you really low, and because you did your research, you know that that's wrong. So that's the whole point of me making the video, is sometimes people don't know to do that research and they hear this terrible number, and that HR person is a big expert and they make a big speech to you about you're like this, this, and this, and for someone like you it would be this, and they're very pushy with this terrible number. If you haven't done your market research and you're not aware, especially if you're young and early career, you might think that that's what your number is, and it's usually not true. So as long as you do your own market research, it's very unlikely that somebody can just fully take advantage of you and pay you like the worst salary for that role. Like, generally not something you have to worry about if you do your research the way that I've talked about in this video. Hopefully this is helpful. Let me know in the comments if you have questions or if there's any follow-up that you'd like me to do. Well, that's it for today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.